Hello, and welcome to the Armonia Seminary podcast. This is possibly an unfamiliar voice. I am Keith Williams, the president and co-founder of Armonia Ceremony, and I'm here today with Alethea, your usual host for these things, to discuss the question, do we have a purpose, specifically in the context of the Jedi Path, but also maybe the broader implications of such a question. Now, Ali, your listeners will know that you're not backward in coming forward about your Christian faith. Now, to you, what does the question, do we have a purpose, mean in that context of your Christian faith?
Well, oftentimes when I go out and I talk to Christians that are of similar background, I've been told we have a spiritual gift that is given to us. Some of them are sign gifts. Some of them are just, like administration or something else that's supposed to contribute to the body of Christ, the church. And we're supposed to step up, grab that spiritual gift, and use it to glorify God in everything that we do, or at least everything we do in the church. Because sometimes, obviously, you're not going to really glorify God in your sleep, I guess.
Well, you never know.
I mean, I guess maybe you could by giving faith that He will hold your breath, as many Jewish traditions I've read about believe that He holds your breath, and so you're giving faith to Him that He's going to hold your breath, your very life essence, during your sleep, and nothing will come of harm to you. So I guess that could be a way to glorify Him. But
Yeah.
the whole point is that you have a purpose, and you just need to seize that purpose and move forward. Okay. And God will align your life to that plan. But you still have to make the choice. That plan is set in stone. That is for you. But you have to pick up that stone and walk with it.
Now, if you were to define that in broad strokes, what would you say the innate purpose there, if you were to sum it up in a statement? So you have all these gifts and so forth, but how would you say I mean, to me, that sounds as though the purpose is to be a good servant of God.
Effectively, it is. And we're told that we have a very specific thing that we're supposed to be doing, that it's not going to be the same. So, for example, and I know that you're not actually Christian yourself, but I know that you understand a lot of the theology behind it because you've worked with people in the field. You, Keith, have a purpose that is unique to you. No one else in the world, at least living right now, has that purpose. So your purpose will be different from mine, even if we have the same spiritual gift. So let's say that I'm a prophet, right? I'm not saying I'm a prophet. Please, no one take that to mean that I'm a prophet. I'm not a prophet.
Ali's a prophet.
No, not a prophet. But let's say that you and I were both prophets. My purpose as a prophet may be to minister to a very specific group of people that you will never minister to.
Yeah.
That makes sense. By that, like, let's say that it's people who do drugs. I used to be a DARE officer, so why not? Let's just throw that out there. I'm supposed to minister to people who do drugs. You might be there to minister to people who do drugs, but a different type of drug, for example. I might be one to minister to people who do meth, because that's a problem around here. Maybe yours is to minister to people who do what's abundant there in the UK.
Oh, tea. Terrible. My area is some nasty stuff called GHB.
GHB.
Spice, stuff like that. I mean,
okay, spice. Whole that's what I know.
Here. Dangerous stuff.
Very, very accurate.
I see where you're coming from. So, and I mean, I suppose that's true of every gift. I mean, we all encounter different groups of people. I mean, if you look back to the Abrahamic traditions, of course, Islam, and so forth, a lot of Christian, Jewish, Islamic traditions have tried to co-opt Buddha, for example, and tried to isolate him as some form of monotheistic prophet, to say that, yes, there are Asian prophets. There was someone who, tried to bring monotheism to, and again, it's been corrupted because
even at that, but Buddhism didn't actually try to do monotheism.
No, but that's what I mean by co-opting.
Wasn't he very much against the idea of him becoming a god, and yet some traditions, say in Japan, do that anyway?
Well, yes. Well, yes, they do. But in Japan, it's not unusual for people to be deified. Largely because
That's very
in the
accurate.
West, for example, we often misunderstand the word kami or kami, as it's sometimes pronounced. We just generally think, oh, it's a god. Well, no, really, it's a spirit. And human beings have spirits, so we can evolve to become and remain a spiritual creature in the afterlife. Now, some unfortunately become a form of ghost. They remain when they shouldn't, and other because they've not been given the proper burial rites and so forth, and some because of the great things they achieved in life become gods. For example, Tokugawa Ieyasu was deified after his death.
Pretty
But
much, yeah.
yeah, but so yes,
The
so
Shinto religion is so complicated you can barely find any books
well,
on it.
yes, and I mean, again, if we come back to the question of purpose, traditional Shinto or original Shinto was very materialistic. It was very much you pray to a god so he gives you something. It wasn't. It wasn't. You give something, and you don't offend the gods. Hence, for example, a woman on her period shouldn't go to a Shinto shrine because of blood being impure. Don't upset the kami by going to. And to us, that sounds horribly sexist and doesn't make any sense because what? but
Yeah.
but in traditional Shinto belief, no blood is impure. Cleanliness is closeness to godliness, to be quite literal. Um, So there isn't actually a lot of purpose in Seifu Shinto. It's it's very much a very material religion. You give something to the gods so that they return something to you.
And I mean, it's not just that. It's also just a matter of being respectful. And it
Yes,
teaches them, and I know a lot of people have not been to Japan, but I love
yes,
Japan.
yes.
Y'all
Beautiful
have
country.
no idea how much I love Japan.
To be fair to everyone I've talked to who's also been to Japan is they love the place, and I think especially come from the West, we go there and it's so clean. You
It
don't
is
see
it is
litter.
clean
You
and
don't see a lot of graffiti.
in many
Uh,
ways, so to kind of go off of this, in many ways, one of the reasons why they live in such harmony with each other is also because they treat everything with respect and they have incorporated even the dead to that. So it's very close to a sort of ancestral worship combined with other forms of worship. It's by far the most unique religion I've ever come across.
Well, yes, and of course you've got the different regional forms.
Right. I think we're getting off track though.
We're getting a little off track, but
We are.
we can bring it back to purpose, and that the purpose in such a structure is, and again, if you go to Taoism, but traditional folk Taoism, or Taoism, as the sound is sometimes produced in the West, when we translate, there is the heavenly bureaucracy. There is a purpose. You are a cog in the wheel, and and especially in Japanese thought, no matter where you end up in life or what you do, you should strive for excellence. And as long as you strove for excellence in what you did, it wasn't a life wasted. Even if it was, to most people, we would think an inconsequential. For example, being a delivery man, that wasn't a wasted life as long as you strove to be an excellent delivery man.
Well, would that be really a purpose? By purpose, when I say purpose, when I think of that word purpose, I think of the Greek word for like kind of fate, but
Hmm.
a fate you can choose to take. Not does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I blame Joseph Campbell.
You blame Joseph Campbell for it
I
making
blame
sense.
Joseph. I do. I blame Joseph Campbell for uh, for the hero's journey into such malarkey. Um, but that's what I mean. Purpose can be. Is it something we give ourselves, which in a humanist model, and I think especially in the Jedi Path is the position most of us take, is that purpose is something we give ourselves. Uh, we find purpose through finding meaning in what we do. But in a lot of, for example, when you talk of fate, you talk of destiny, and you look to the ancient um,
Destiny.
myths.
Yes, that's actually the better
Yes,
word for it because fate
destiny.
basically is something you cannot change, but a
Yeah,
destiny is something you can choose to
yes,
take up.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
if
the
oh, sorry.
perfect word for what I believe is pushed in
Hmm.
Christianity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well,
overall,
yeah.
now I want to kind of get into this one too. Overall,
Hang on.
in Christianity, I do not see anything in the Bible that supports the idea of of everyone having an individual destiny.
Hmm.
So you look at it, and King Saul, it was the one that came to be a king, and later on it was King David, and eventually Jesus came and he had a purpose. But if you look at the Bible, not everybody had a purpose. They were requested. It
Hmm.
was God said, "I have a request of you." Well, maybe a demand, depending on how you want to look at it. And that
Hmm.
is, choose me over every other god and follow me because you believe that I am right. That I will protect you, that I am the one that will make the world a better place where those other beings over there that think they're gods won't do that.
Hmm.
And as a result, it's just something that you do. But
Hmm.
everything in between, so King Solomon was destined to create the temple, right? I
Yes.
mean, it was even told to King David, I don't want you to build that temple. It'll be your son who builds the temple.
With a far cooler name.
Yes, actually, Solomon is a cooler name. It's my son's middle name.
Yeah,
um,
I hate to say it now, but that's my cat's name.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's amusing. So he was destined to do that, but he could do other things all in between all of that. Now, he did cultivate uh, skills
Hmm.
so that he could eventually do that. He was he was very much into carpentry from what we can see in the Bible, and um, he was also very wise, so he knew where to get different materials that would actually erect all this stuff, and he knew how to structure everything, and he understood what God was telling him when he said, "This is how I want it built," and all that. But he had other things that he could do in the meantime. Um, he asked for wisdom. He wasn't destined. He wasn't necessarily destined to be wise, though
Hmm.
God knew, that would be something that he would ask for because free will gave him that, and he said, "Okay, I will make you the most wise, and no one will be wiser than you ever." And so he gave him that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he was destined for that. That was something that he chose,
Hmm.
and God knew
Well,
he would choose it instead of making him choose it, so to speak.
well,
Do you see
yeah,
where I'm
no, it
going with
makes
that?
sense. Yeah, and I mean, if we're talking the Greeks, the Romans, so forth, we go to the Iliad, go to the Ennead, and so forth, with the gods playing chess, basically, with the lives of mortals, but their choices still matter. For example, that is the great thing about Achilles' story, is he could stay home, grow up an old man, live a happy life, but have his name disappear from history. You know,
Mm.
maybe have a genetic legacy, but no form of mimetic legacy, or he could take up his arms, go to Troy, and be remembered for all time. And
Now, right, but even at that, see, now here's where it gets interesting. So in our first class, well, in the class that people that would kind of be
do you just
considered
want
the
to put
first,
that in context for listeners?
uh, I'm about to, called the Force Beyond Star Wars.
Yeah.
So it would be basically if you were to take our studies at Armonia, the Force would kind of be the first one that you would take up, so that you would have a baseline of this is what it is, and then you would go on for the other classes so that you know how to work all that in. Well, anyways, so the Force, in that class, we talk about the Igbo tradition, and you are introduced to the idea of what's good and evil and whatnot. But I want to go a little bit deeper in here about what their tradition says. So they believe that there is a God who's uh, kind of a personal God, almost like a daemon in the Greek tradition.
Hmm.
And it's called, get this, it's called chi.
Okay.
It's not chi like what you would see in China. It's a personal deity called Chi, and it's named after Chiawu Chi. Jeez, Chiawuku.
Okay.
Chiaku. I
Yes.
think it's Chiaku.
We can put it in the comments.
Yes, we will put
in
it
the
in the
description
comments
so people can find it.
So yes, and what they believe is that this chi influences everything in your life, and you have to agree with it. So there's this belief in many culture, or in the New Age perspective. And yes, I'm throwing that out there. I know you pretty much do not like New Age stuff, but
the age of Aquarius is a bit of an age of, I have no polite words. But carry on.
The New Age traditions have this kind of idea that some of them do, not all of them, so have this idea that when you came to your body as a spirit, you had a contract. You contracted. This is the package that I'm getting. You even picked your family. That's right. According to this tradition, I picked my abusive father and my awesome mother. According to this tradition, because I needed to learn something in this life. So I picked it. It's what my road is going to be, but it's for me to learn something, and it's not necessarily a fate, so to speak, but it's just a learning experience, kind of like you choose a class in college.
Right. So in that sense, from that perspective, the purpose of life it's a learning experience.
Yes.
I suppose it must be a reincarnation model. Otherwise, that makes no sense. Because if you're born, why did you?
Why did you choose? Right.
Yeah.
And
because it must have a context.
Right, and that is in the reincarnation context. So similar to that, the Igbo believe that you came and you were kind of given a package, but your package was not necessarily to learn. It was to build humanity and to have experiences, not learning experiences necessarily, but to have experiences. So let's take, we're going to go with the infamous, most hated person in our modern-ish, or contemporary history.
That's not a very nice way to talk about Rand Paul.
I'm talking about Hitler. Hitler. Okay. So Hitler came into this world, and his chi had agreed that it would be this horrifying thing to humanity. It was going to cause the Holocaust. It was going to make sure that people were exposed to the understanding that evil men exist, and this is what it looks like. Don't do this again. And so it has a purpose. Its purpose is to teach humanity as a whole. So everybody in this instance has a purpose. Even so, in their belief, then not only is a horrifying man given this purpose as far as she goes, but also Martin Luther King, who we all know and love. At least I hope everybody loves him. He's an awesome guy. Or was an awesome guy.
He was.
Yes.
So
he came in with the purpose of, we can overcome these problems. Society has the capacity to overcome these problems. Just keep working on it. And that was the lesson that he was supposed to teach. And every human being has this. Some of them have grand ability, or the grandness of whatever, and then others are not so grand. They might just be destined to marry somebody in particular, because that's what the chi, who is in agreement with Chukwu, the god of the big god.
Someone has to perpetuate the human race.
Right. So, and if you don't, so this is where their spiritual leaders come in. If you don't, you are given some form of illness. So your body can disagree with your soul, or your consciousness can disagree. So if you see consciousness as being what's here in the world, and your chi is kind of like your subconscious, your conscious can disagree with your subconscious, with your chi. And when you do, you become unaligned. So going back to that idea of aligning your mind, body, and soul so that you can fulfill this purpose. And if you don't, well, what you do is you go to a spiritual leader who was destined also to be a spiritual leader, and they will help you figure out what it is that you did wrong, and they'll tell you what you need to do to make it right with your chi. Otherwise, you're just doomed until you get it right to this life where you're plagued by some sort of mental health issue, cancer, you can't get pregnant, or whatever the problem is.
Interesting.
Yes, it actually is. I had a lot of fun researching this.
That's interesting.
This script.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So.
Yes, I mean, I'd say that's quite almost a primitive form of. I won't call it psychology because that'd be wrong. I mean.
I don't know. I mean, it could be considered a primitive form of psychology.
It's a primitive form of trying to understand where problems are, and it's not entirely wrong, because it is about, a lot of it's wrong, of course, because unfortunately that is a form of what I would call metaphysical biology. It presumes that the metaphysical determines the biological, when the real relationship is a lot more entangled than that. The mind, the conscious, does have a huge effect on our health, but vice versa as well. Issues with our physical health do affect our mental health as well. So yeah, that is interesting, and the idea. And I think, have you ever heard of logotherapy?
No.
No. Well, essentially, basically, it is about finding the meaning to your actions. So the basic argument is that mental health issues and so forth arise from not having an understanding of the meaning of your actions, to find your actions are meaningless and so forth. And to an extent, you can see this in most humanist therapy, mindfulness as well. Mindfulness is about being conscious in every moment, accepting our emotions and so forth. And it's about finding a meaning in what can be seemingly meaningless. So to go back to the question of do we have a purpose, that is a huge existential question, and if your answer is no, I do not have a purpose, that can be very debilitating.
Well, but could it not also be debilitating to believe that you have a divine purpose?
Oh yes,
and then
you
never really it never comes to fruition.
Oh, no, of course. As I wrote in a blog post a few weeks ago about how I've met people who have had lifelong dreams, and they've attained what they thought was the dream, and all of a sudden actually it has no meaning, because what was meaningful to them was the journey, and the goal actually was unimportant. So they spiraled out into this, have I wasted my life? Because they used this dream to give themselves a purpose. And I mean, I think that is the conflict. If someone is religious, most religious individuals do have what I would call a top-down approach to purpose. For example, as you said, a lot of Christians, especially evangelicals and that particular brand of Christianity, believe in gifts, and that you are given a gift by God, that it's then your responsibility to an extent to make best use of, or he has given you this gift for a reason. As I said, from the humanist perspective, we have to give ourselves meaning, because to the humanist, and especially from the scientific perspective, we're just pan-Naran. We're just a bunch of talking apes on a rock floating through space. That's what we are. That's humanity. So achieving meaning from the humanist perspective is finding meaning in your own life from the things you do. Your purpose is what you give yourself. And I think that's where the question, do we have a purpose, becomes increasingly complicated, especially between people who attach a deep spiritual meaning to the question and those who are very much of the opinion, no, I have to give myself meaning. And And I think that's where Jediism, or the Jedi Path, is at a crossroads in most discussions. Because this Jedi, and excuse me if I'm dominating the conversation at the moment, Jedi, we believe in helping others. That's our fundamental thing. We believe the good thing in life is to help others, and that is a good purpose, and that helping others is meaningful. Now, then, of course, you get the different approaches to that. For me, I'm very secular. My perspective comes from my psychological training and so forth, and I'm just convinced human beings are social animals, and the best way for society to thrive and continue forward is that we all pull our weight, and that means helping each other. And that ultimately what is most meaningful in life is the connections we make through others and what we can do for others.
And that definitely goes directly to one of the core ethics outlined in the Jedi Compass, which is duty to the all.
Yes. But as I said, then you have others who, for example, believe in the Force as a metaphysical concept. They have a very spiritual concept, and they believe that helping others you're called to do by the very nature of the universe. That we are not divisible from one another. We are not these creatures made of clay. So, as I said, it depends where you come from. If you're coming from this top-down position I talked about, the meaning comes from how the universe, the cosmology, how the universe is made up. That's your justification for why you are a Jedi, why you engage in helping behaviors. If you come from a bottom-up perspective, you come from the perspective of, well, I'm just an individual in this world, but I can find meaning in what I do by helping others, by being part of the lives of others. And there's a very interesting book I once read by the late Ian Banks called Wit, which is a satire about a religious cult called the Elect of God. And one interesting precept in their book is, in their religion, in the book, is that humanity is too immature to know God's plan, that we are spiritually immature. And that, conversely, our addiction to science and technology and so forth is just more reflections of our spiritual immaturity. Essentially, we can't know God's plan because we're not even children, we're infants. And to God, we're infants with severe learning difficulties or specific educational needs. So he hasn't really revealed his purpose to us, our purpose to us. I've always found that a very interesting idea, because of course this is a cult called themselves the Elect of God, and they believe in God, and they believe they know the truth of God, and one of their fundamental teachings is that actually we don't yet know God's purpose for us.
That's definitely their arrogance and non-arrogance showing.
Yes, exactly. And again,
kind of sounds like the Tao that can be known cannot be. How does that go?
It's a very similar idea. But again, it's a very interesting things about God in there. For example, talking about how God can make strategic decisions. God has a big, huge plan, but he allows free will because he allows this big plan to come about through multiple different ways. But they also say God isn't present in the world because God, he's just a scientist. He's just created us and he's watching us. But we're just one test tube in a bunch of other test tubes. We're not the most important to him. We're important to him because we're his children, or her children, or their children, to use the book's terminology. As I said, from a top-down perspective, I find that an interesting idea, as I said, because religion, as you said, the Bible does not explicitly state that every human being has a purpose, or an individual special purpose, and yet that's become part of mainstream Christian belief in a lot of ways.
And I think that maybe that is influenced by the idea of destiny that you find in
Yes.
certain other
Yes.
cultures. The other day I was watching a show on Gaia.com and I wanted to slam my head against my computer or against the local wall that I had available to me, because while this guy was talking about his beliefs, he brought up, wait for it, because I know I'm gonna have people scream, because they're gonna either scream at me like, "What are you talking about?" or they're gonna be like, "Yes! And why did they say that?" Lumeria, which they were like, "Oh yeah, our ancestors came from Lumeria."
Ah, yes.
And I'm sitting there banging my head against a wall like that was a scientific theory proposed in the 19th century. People.
Well, it's all tied back to eugenics as well.
Wait.
Uh,
N-
to an extent.
I
To an
don't see how that
extent.
is. It was named. It was okay. You tell me what you think it was named after, and I'll explain what it really was named after.
We might be thinking different theories here. So,
Okay.
what theory are you drawing at?
Lumeria was
Yeah.
proposed as a land bridge between Africa
Yeah.
and Madagascar to explain why you
Ah,
could find
yes, the lost
lemurs.
land, Lemuria, the lost land.
Yes, where you could. And it was named after lemurs. Like literally, that's where the name Lumeria comes from. It's after lemurs, and it was overthrown in favor of plate tectonics.
Yes.
So Lumeria has nothing to do with it, and here's this guy who is considered an indigenous person, and he probably picked up the name somewhere. But this is what happens to our cultures. We pick up things and we incorporate them into our myths, into our legends, into our beliefs, because we think that it confirms what we already have. And that's not the case.
It's bias. And I mean...
Well, it's not... I mean, on a level, it's bias.
Yeah.
But it's also, misunderstanding what it is. And that's probably what really happened here was, they heard about this land and they didn't know that it was supposed to be a proposed land bridge. And then they were like, oh, well, that kind of sounds like where we might have come from, because we kind of believe that we came from over the sea on some big continent type island or whatever. And for all we know, it was probably Zealandia, which has scientific basis as a theory in the South Pacific Ocean over there. Named after Zealand. There's New Zealand, so Zealandia. Yes. Yeah, Zealandia. Get it? So anyways... you see those things and we incorporate them, and Christianity does this all the time.
Yes.
The date for Easter. Well, people could take that and be like, okay, well, it was actually over Passover, but Easter just kind of seems like it's a good time to do the same thing. It all means the same thing. Effectively, we're just going to superimpose Christianity beliefs on it.
I'm trying to remember, because there's always a counter-argument to these assumptions that Christianity stole everything.
No, I'm not saying that we stole everything.
No. Because I think there's something, and I ask any listeners to personally research themselves. I'm fairly certain the Easter date is to do with the concept that prophets are conceived, die the same day they were conceived. So
I've never heard that belief. That must be something.
Yeah.
And
something
nope.
Like
I
that.
used to be Catholic. I've never heard that belief.
Yeah, it's something like that. But it's a Jewish belief. But some people try to historically argue that that's why Easter's date keeps moving, or it comes from that belief. But of course, it doesn't really make much sense, because that would be a huge birth cycle.
Not only that, it's also based on the moon cycle.
Yes, exactly.
One's based on the moon. The Passover is based on the sun cycle, I think, and the moon cycle is based on, or Easter's based on the moon cycle. Well, or it's flipped. I don't remember which one.
But again, we're escaping the purpose.
Yes. So the point is that they take these things, and just like destiny was probably just taken in and adopted into the culture, because honestly, you can go to 1,000 Christians, just random Christians, across whatever country you want to go across, and they will have different interpretations of what the Bible says. Some of them founded in the Bible, and some of them not founded in the Bible, because they're going off of what they're being told, either because they are illiterate, they don't have really good reading comprehension, or laziness. I don't like to say that word, but laziness.
Well, there's a degree of apathy, and I mean,
it's easier to listen to your pastor. I mean, let's be real.
Yeah, yes, and that's what I mean. I think, and it's a classic criticism, and it's a bit boring.
So,
but
if I was to go back to
religion, especially Christianity, from its conception to now, has been used in social models of control, and the ancient tradition of the priest is the one who knows best hasn't really fallen out of favour. We've just replaced it with different things. The elders, yes, they're not anointed, but they're still given greater deference.
Right.
So people still prefer to listen to authority figures. And I think the thing is that an authority figure, as said, it's that connection to a human figure. And I mean, you see this sort of thinking in martial arts as well. Any martial artist who paid attention to all the modern martial arts would know that styles are redundant. What works in a fight works in a fight.
Right.
Advice, But people still, even if they say that, even if they talk about Bruce Lee saying so and so, so, then you ask them what they do, they'll then blurt out their style. They'll still say, "Oh, I do Shito-ryu karate, okay," or I do 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu.
Right.
Or I do, And even though people know that being beholden to styles is a bit redundant, they still say it. But most of the styles also have a lot of cultural baggage. Practicing karate is not just about, for example, throwing your arms and legs about. There's the wearing of the gi. There's the cultural practice of bowing for language and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And if we then take that back to what we were talking about cultural exchange before, is that these ideas and so forth, they can permeate, but people still want to feel like they belong to something special,
right?
And different.
And even at that, you can also see this kind of in. Now, you brought up we're social creatures.
Yes.
We also, and you could probably attest to this, I'm sure you studied it, and I'm sure you had some sort of anthropological class when you were going through college.
Yeah, to an extent.
So then you know that we also have kind of a pack mentality. So we might go to high school, and you can tell that this group over here is their group. They might not be segmented by a particular type of culture that's easy to identify, like you would see in Mean Girls, so to speak. But it's still.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Oh well.
I think I've seen memes related to it, but I don't think I've ever seen it.
It's kind of an amusing thing, Mean Girls, but I'm a woman, so that's probably why I've watched it.
I don't watch a lot of television. That's not just a gender identity thing. That's me not watching a lot of television.
Well, okay, that's fair. So she, you go in and they'll have like, these are the jocks and these are the goths and these are the druggies over here.
Again, we can drag this back to purpose. That is how a lot of people find purpose, by finding the group that they most belong to.
Right, just like a pack, and it's pretty much like a pack mentality.
And that's where people find meaning.
They find a niche to fulfill. So that might be in a group in high school. That might be being the friend for someone to lean on.
Yeah.
Or being the constant person that needs to lean on somebody in some way that they find that so that they can feel like they're included. And when you go to tribes, or at least the stereotype of what a tribe looks like, you have typically in your minds, in our minds, we can envision it. You have the hunters who are the men.
Yeah.
And their whole culture is based around this idea of becoming this hunter to provide meat for the families. And then the women are supposed to be gatherers. Yes. And when you start getting to a point where you're a little bit bigger, the bigger you get, you have to find other things for those people to fulfill. So it might be that they are some of them are watching after the kids while the others go out and they gather, or they're teaching the kids how to gather. So they're watching after the kids. And then as you get even more, you start having the people that do basket weaving, that do, when you get more men, you have people that go into blacksmithing. And eventually, because as you grow out, it effectively becomes kind of a capitalist organization.
Well, yes.
because you have to sustain everybody, and everybody has to have a place for them to fulfill.
As I said, if we go back to purpose, that's a thing where people find purpose. They are this important thing in this society, and I think that's why people get more nihilistic when they're less connected to others, because in a society as large as the ones we live in now, the United Kingdom is 60 million people. I'm just one person among 60 million people. And then if we talk about the United States, well, that's
we're massive.
Exactly. You're just one person in this supposed cultural identity, but you go from state to state, you go from town to town, and there's huge differences.
And you then, always have to learn how to reconnect with the people too if you're moving around.
Exactly. And so even now, it's still even though our cultures are monolithic, they are huge. What we technically belong to the rest of the world. I mean, when I think of Russians, I think of Russia. I don't think of specific regions of Russia, their distinct cultures and so forth. Sometimes I do, if I've been watching a TV show about the distinct cultures and so forth. But very rarely, and that's the thing, we because as human beings, we stereotype. But as I said, that scale, and then when you feel about yourself in that scale and you don't have connections and so forth, you start to lose purpose. And then again, as you were talking about how people's purpose through age changes, let's talk about the controlling grandmother. That's a classic stereotype.
But the person that can't let go, or even you can see the same model when they have the theory. I don't really know if it's really a theory, but called out of the nest syndrome.
Yes, and that's what but as I said, it's about that changing purpose, and again, it comes to this top down and this down up difference in experience, and there's a lot of interaction which isn't often talked about. For example, the top down model I was talking about. Yes, you think you've been given a specific purpose, but you might, for example, your gift might be you have the gift of being a very social, welcoming person. You're very good at getting people included in your church, and so on and so forth. So you're sat at the front every day, greeting new people, and you get there to make sure everything's ready to greet new people. Your gift is you are a great greeter, and that is your contribution to you.
But
after
the problem
10 years, you could be exhausted from that.
Yeah, and it doesn't take long to really get to the point where you're just like, this just does not seem fulfilling anymore. Because you've greeted the same people over and over again, and then you're like, here's what should have happened. All of you guys should have been greeting each other.
Yeah.
Because now I feel like I haven't done my job. And me being the social person I am, that's exactly how I've felt.
But that's what I mean. It's about you can feel the justification for what you're doing for the church. It can be from the top-down model. You feel as though my purpose has been given. I've got this gift for this. I should be using it. But over time, that down-up model sneaks in. Is this actually fulfilling? Are you finding this meaningful? And so you get this conflict between your concept of purpose. And again, even someone who originally comes from a down-up model for meaning and so forth can eventually get that top-down approach, because you become involved in a community, and the pressure to keep doing what you're doing isn't coming from you anymore. It's coming from the people above you, and you don't want to let them down. And they're saying, this is what you bring, this is the meaning to your actions. So they interact. So it's not a one-way street, as I made it sound earlier. And again, this is how purpose changes through age, that I was talking about.
Right.
The controlling grandmother.
Going back,
she has children.
Right. Going back to the Jedi Path.
Yes.
I kind of want to see if you can connect. So if you can on your own computer, pull up the Jedi Compass.
Oh, it's already up.
Oh, good. Ha! Good. So I want to see if you can connect how in the Jedi Path itself. And this, for people who don't know, the Jedi Compass was written in 2013 after it was taken to every order that was active at the time, and asked, "Hey, how do we adapt this so that it still fits your order's way of looking at things?" And it actually originally started out by looking at the Jedi behaviors and comparing doctrines side by side. So, like, you go to the Jedi behaviors and you would compare the doctrine of Temple of the Jedi Order. And then everything that was not on Temple of the Jedi Order, it got striked off the list. And then we went and we took Temple of the Jedi Force, struck off everything. We went to the Jedi Circle, striked off everything. And eventually we got down to what is the bare bones. This is what every order seems to agree on. And
I was about to say, I don't think we're going to get sponsor money through name dropping.
Probably not. It's okay, though. I don't mind name dropping some of these people.
Yep.
And so we took it, and
if you want name dropped, you know why.
So we took it, and we walked over to different groups, and we said, okay, so help rewrite these. And originally it was actually called the Jedi Pyramid. No one liked that idea because it made it seem like everything should be like the first thing that was listed up there was the most important thing for you, which happened to be the Force. And they were just kind of like, no, we don't really like the idea of making it so that it looks like these are more important than another. I was like, okay.
See, that's just people not understanding how a pyramid is built.
No.
If you'd asked a bunch of architects, they might have been able to make it make sense.
But it actually made a lot of sense that they were talking about it like that, because you think of Maslow's hierarchy when you think of a pyramid, and that was the same thing that they were going for. That's what they were seeing in their heads when I had the Jedi Pyramid up there. So actually, one of the guys at Temple of the Jedi Order came up with the name Jedi Compass. His name was Jester, and people were like, "That's a great name. Let's go for it." And I remember thinking the first thing I saw in my head was Pocahontas, looking at the compass, and it was pointing a direction that she was supposed to go, and it was definitely not north. But it was the perfect name. So this is effectively the bare bones. This is what the entire Jedi community agreed in 2013 is what we agree on. And come 2025, we might go back and look at it and say, well, maybe we need to revise this, come up with more stuff to put in it, take off something. I don't know what's going to happen back then, but we're going to see. Yeah. And hopefully every 10 years that will be replicated. But
going back to purpose, I mean, if anyone who's read it, again, we'll put a link in the description for people who might not have read it. If you look at it, that essentially outlines the purpose of being a Jedi.
Right. But here's the thing. The Jedi Path is not one that you have to choose. See, this is something that gets to me. When people talk about the Jedi Path, and they're like, oh, it has to be inclusive. It has to be this. And the reason I came to the Jedi Path was because I wanted to be accepted, and you guys are not accepting me because I don't believe that this is what the Jedi Path is. And I'm like, except this is what it is, according to the people who wrote it in 2013, in 2025, if you want to go back over it.
If we're going to get into the basic argument there is, a word is used because it's exclusionary.
Well, that's true.
We use a word, we use a term because it means something. If I say wall, I'm not talking about the window. So
right.
No, and they both have exclusionary qualities.
Exactly.
Yes, they're both parts of a building. They're both usually flat, and they can be part of the support structure to an extent. But they both serve very different purposes.
Right.
So if you say Jedi has to mean something.
Yeah, a Jedi does have to mean something. And so in this argument, yes, there is a such thing as a no true Scotsman.
Yeah.
And I know everybody's like, oh, well, that's the fallacy. No, there is a such thing as a no true Scotsman. But in that analogy, what you're saying is there's no such thing as someone who is not of this nationality. It's completely different. There is a set down definition. This is what it is. But here's the thing. We do not believe that people who are not Jedi are bad people.
No.
Jedi is a path that you choose. And so when you choose this, you're saying, this is how I want my life to align. Now, this is kind of thing. This does not actually, this gives you a purpose you can choose. Now, how you choose that, see, it doesn't actually give you a purpose, though. It just gives you this is what you should do.
It's a guide, help people. It's a guide to finding meaning. It's a guide
yes, it is a guide to find meaning. Exactly.
And if finding purpose from
to
that
find
meaning.
your journey, to be the hero of your own story. And I know how you feel about the hero's journey.
Campbell.
But
Your soup is awful as well.
But still,
No,
that's
I
kind
think
of the
that's a
point,
different
is that
person.
this is the hero's journey that
Yes.
we are asking you to step on, and this is how we think that this is how the Jedi Path says you should pursue your hero's journey. You should be okay. So in Joseph Campbell's videos with Bill Moyers, there's an outline of a story of a woman who she doesn't want to get married or something like that, and so she finds this
Wise woman.
snake. I think it's a snake or some sort of being that takes her into the waters, and it's kind of all this dream world type thing, and that was her journey. But it was a personal journey where she had to learn that it was the wrong thing, that was not the life that she was meant to have. And so that is a hero's journey because she heroically pulls herself out of it. But that's not what we believe, not as Jedi. We believe in duty to all, which I mentioned earlier, and you mentioned too. And this is, you are supposed to, let me read it off. A Jedi's mission is to support their community through service. A Jedi is charged with acting objectively when they recognize a situation where someone needs help. Jedi put their lives above the lives of others, even when facing danger, but know that they can help through direct action or indirect action as per the situation. So what this means, Jedi put their lives above the lives of others. If you are not living, if you are not alive, you can't help that person.
Well, yeah, but I think that's an interesting thing. Is there's a saying in first aid, for example, a selfish first aider is a good first aider. You don't rush into a situation because you could just end up an additional casualty for the aider who's coming after you.
Exactly.
And again, if we do,
and we'll have to talk about that one at another time.
Yes, we will do.
So,
yes, another topic. For time.
Yeah, that is another
But yeah,
topic.
getting back to purpose.
So to me, when we look at this, that is the duty to all is the purpose, and that is what the Jedi Path gives you. Now, what this also means, originally it was proposed to say duty to the people. But the reason that it doesn't say duty to the people is because somebody argued that maybe your role in life has nothing to do with human beings. Yep, I said that.
Okay.
Maybe.
So now we are talking about, do we have purpose?
Well, pretty much. But it's also, maybe you don't like people. You just can't stand being around them. And that's true. There are people out there that cannot stand being around them. So maybe you do. Maybe you work at the Humane Society, and you pursue the becoming the best person at the Humane Society. And I'll have to go into later on exactly how we believe that's supposed to be a role that you take up. It's not just being the average worker at the Humane Society. In order to be a Jedi, you have to pursue excellence in it.
Spoiler warnings, that might be next week's topic.
Maybe. Yes, maybe. So that's the purpose. Now, where does the Force fit into this? Now, in my belief, some people are called to a specific thing. Obviously, when I look at the Bible, I see that there were prophets. Prophets were called to be a prophet, even if they didn't like it. Jonah and the whale comes to mind. Obviously, he didn't like it. It got swallowed by a whale because he tried to run away from it.
Yep. Maybe the whale was the prophet. Maybe we got it all wrong.
Oh, maybe. So, and for any of you out there that are screaming at me, big fish, okay? But people usually say whale, so whatever. You knew what I meant. But there are people who are called. Jesus is another person that you could say was called. If you believe that he was just the Son of God and not part of this holy Trinity that is all God.
If he was just a prophet.
Right. If he was just a prophet that was extra special. So, I mean, some people do. Some people believe that he was just a prophet that was extra special.
Well, he's a deeply respected prophet in Islam.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. Is he is a deeply respected prophet in Islam, for example. So.
Yeah. So then if we go to the Igbo, for example, then someone who is a Jedi, maybe they chose that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they chose that was their slot in life. They might not know that that's the word that they align with, because maybe they do go through and they have a respect for the law. They defend people. They take action when it's necessary. They believe in cultivating their self-awareness. They believe in being tolerant and responsible and disciplined and have fortitude and be of the utmost integrity. Maintain objectivity. Maybe they do, but they don't know that the word Jedi aligns with that. But they could still be Jedi if they, if they meet all of this criteria. Which, like I said, there's more into that, but we'll get to that another week.
Yes.
So the Force may or may not have a purpose for you. So from the Jedi perspective, as a Christian Jedi, even myself, maybe I have a purpose. Maybe I'm supposed to be teaching. Maybe I'm supposed to be teaching this Christian curriculum. Maybe that's what God had slotted for me. I don't know. Or maybe I'm doing that because I want to.
Possibly both.
Possibly both. Well, I would hope that if I was slotted to do it, it was because that my wanting to do it was kind of because of that. But then again, we look at Jonah; he didn't really want to do that. So,
well, I said it comes down to your belief whether God's a bad boss or not.
Right. So, and and like I said in the beginning, I'm not a prophet.
And going back to that book I was talking about, Wit, and we're too immature to actually know God's intent. Maybe that is right to an extent, if there is a God and so on and so forth. And maybe all we can do is do our best to find our own meaning.
And I think that you can seek out the Force for that.
Yeah.
I do believe that people who engage, and now I'm going to sound very blasphemous, but I do believe that people who seek out becoming shamanic journeys can come out with a newfound purpose in life. And so they sought the Force for what should my purpose be, and then it was kind of gifted to them. Well, these are all your gifts.
Yeah.
This is what I think, or this is what, according to the Force, you when you align it all together, this is what you align with. And that's all metaphysical, and you can argue whether or not that is a true purpose, or if it's just the psychological bounds of this is the purpose that I'm kind of assigning myself or whatever. But still, it's there. It's available to people to understand that that's possibly what's going on. And if there was anything in here, in the Jedi Path, that would align to that idea of whether or not there's a purpose, I think that's it.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is I think it's bad. And I kind of wanted to address this earlier, and I only touched it really quick, but then we went on a tangent, which I'm about to do now.
Tangents are good fun.
Right. So my point with saying, isn't it a bad thing to tell everybody they have a purpose? I know people, I don't know just one person, I know a multitude of people who have walked away from Christianity because they were told they have a purpose, and when they started trying to fulfill that purpose, they felt like God was abusing them.
Yeah.
Or they were told they had a purpose, and they tried for years to get that purpose, and what it turned out was maybe they didn't actually have that purpose, but some person who claimed to be a man of God or a woman of God had told them that that was their purpose. And as a result, they got discouraged. And when they got discouraged, because they felt like God had kind of rejected them, they're like, well, either there is no God or God really does not care.
Yes.
And so they walk away.
Yeah, I think this is a good topic to conclude on, really, this sort of angle, and it goes back to what I was talking about with the top-down and the down-up approach. As said, did they really get the meaning from their own feelings, or were they just told this is your purpose? And but sometimes does that person really have your best interests in telling you your purpose? Because they could look at you and say, well, they sort of have a talent for that. They're very willing and interesting to do this, and we do need someone to do it. So
Well, I think
Yes.
I do believe that there are people who genuinely believe that. I know that
Yeah.
the church I left recently, like last year, they believed that I was supposed to be part of the choir.
Hmm.
I did not feel the same way. I didn't know why I didn't feel the same way.
No.
Well, I know a little bit of why. And that was mostly because I didn't agree with how they did music.
Ah.
Their music was very, there's a word for it, it's called Hillsongation.
Oh no.
And it was also not, I believe, my personal belief is that music is supposed to enhance the sermon. So
Hmm.
you don't just pick songs at random to worship, or even the ones that just everybody knows. I believe that when you when they sing, when the choir gets up there and they sing something that's very relevant. So let's say one of the years I went in and it was Palm Sunday, and I asked I asked the people who were going to be singing. I was like, "Did you consider singing a song that's related to Palm Sunday, or do you even have like an idea of what you're going to sing next week during Resurrection Sunday that's related to the resurrection?" And they were like, no, we didn't think about doing that.
Hmm.
Even though that day they were going to be singing about or they were going to be talking about Palm Sunday in the sermon. Now, I know that's mostly Catholic, but they just happened to be talking about it that year.
Well, I
And I
think.
said, look, there's actually a very fast song that you guys can do. It doesn't
Yeah.
take long to figure it out. And I'm pretty sure now, I don't remember, but I think it was by Hillsong also, ironically,
Yeah.
called
I was.
Hosanna.
Ah, yes, I've heard of Hosanna.
So, and it basically ties back to when Christ, where they were putting down the
Yeah.
palm tree leaves, and Christ was
Well,
riding in on the donkey, and they were all saying Hosanna. So, this was the song that I was like, okay, you guys could practice this real quick and have it ready when
yeah.
the congregation comes in. And it was just little things like that I was kind of sitting there and
Yeah.
I'm like,
I think in discussing this, it comes down to cross purposes. You said that a choir exists to sing, and it's supposed to support the church.
right, and that's kind of how I saw it. But
at the
are
same
they?
time,
Here's the question:
yeah,
were they wrong to ask me to become part of their choir?
depends how they framed
Is
it.
that not? Now, you've never heard me sing, I don't think.
No, top of my head, no.
I think Connor's the only person that's heard me sing, and it was kind of a like rushed. I also wrote new lyrics because I couldn't sing the Spanish in time song, but he was like, it's not bad. I could probably work with you a little bit. And for anyone that doesn't know Connor's background is in opera.
Mr.
He
Liddell.
teaches music and whatnot in New York. He's a really good
New
guy in the
York,
Jedi
New York,
community.
it's hell of a place.
Right. So and one of the things is that I do seem to have a gift for singing. I can't do the music, but like I couldn't pick up a guitar or anything like that. But I do seem to have a gift for that. And maybe that was something that I could slide into in the future. But it didn't align with that church.
No.
And so were they wrong to ask me to be part of theirs? No. It wasn't that they didn't have my best interests involved. And it wasn't just because they thought that they needed people to be on their choir, because they really didn't. We were such a small congregation. I think the max we ever had was like 5 people, and 3 of the people were actually already on the choir. So there was no real purpose to make me be on the choir. But they felt like that was the truth of the matter, that was where I was supposed to slide in. So it's not that they don't have your best interest involved, or that they don't honestly believe that this is the case.
Well, no, that's not what I was saying at all.
Well, that's what it sounded like. But
I
I got to address it anyway, so...
Yeah, my point was that sometimes these biases occur, that people aren't really thinking deeply about the big picture. And also because if you're raised in that sort of language, or that's how things are talked about, it's very easy to slip into talking in that manner when in reality you're just thinking The reality is that your actual thought pattern deep down is that, oh, we need a greeter. This is a new person. I'd like to get them involved a bit more. And they seem to be really good with people. Maybe I should ask them to volunteer. But sometimes, as said, it's about the language. Sometimes you're not programmed, as it were, linguistically to go to church and talk that way and say, look, I know you're new, but I think I'd like you to, and that's how language is dangerous, especially when we're talking about purpose and meaning, is that sometimes we frame the mundane in terminology we shouldn't. If that makes any sense, I hope it makes sense.
It does. And I'll also note that in some more charismatic leaning denominations, that they do believe
give me
that
money
they're
or you're going to
communicating.
hell.
Huh?
Yes. Sorry, I was making a pun. Give me money or you're going to hell.
Oh no, actually, that's not really what it is. Charismatic church is the ones that believe very strongly in signs, and they're called continuationist.
Oh, yes. I mean, just the things you see on TV.
Like
looking through.
They're the ones that you see people. A lot of charismatic leaning would also be Pentecostal. So you see people going, "The devil will come out of you!" Bam, hit their head, and then they fall to the ground.
Oh, yes.
Or they speak in tongues, and they believe that if you have enough faith, everybody that has enough faith will eventually get the gift of prophecy.
Oh.
So yeah, it's a very So when you look at these people, they honestly believe that this is what's being told to them. And that's actually a study that I'll be doing in the future. It was requested of me to do a study on prophecy for the small group that I guess I've kind of gotten with our Bible studies. And if anybody's interested about that, just make sure that you get onto our Facebook page. And when I have a Bible study, I'll let you all know. And eventually, we're hoping
on this podcast.
Right. Yeah. And eventually we're hoping that we'll have other people that are into other traditions, not just Christian. Like we have a shaman, a Peruvian shaman on our staff that I'm trying to get him to work on a shamanic path, shamanic curriculum as well. It's just kind of difficult to get him to do that because he has a life where I don't.
Terrible thing, a life, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't have a life.
Keeps you busy from things.
See, that's just that I have not really found my purpose. I have a plethora of things that I could do. I find opportunities to use my skills and my talents, and right now that's pretty much how I'm being my own Jedi. Yeah. As I'm trying to teach, and I'm if you are suicidal, please come to me. You can come to the Armonia page and talk to us. We'll get back to you. We'll see if we can't help you find, even if I have to, I will look for a psychologist in your area.
Yeah, I mean, I can't promise to do the same, but I'm a blue light champion with mind. I do have connections. So, yeah, if anyone is feeling a bit down or would actually, want to become involved in stuff like the blue light champion, if you're in the uniformed services, where mind offers its services, it's a good thing to be involved in.
Yeah, exactly. So, we'll do what we can, and, I actually happen to be very skilled at finding you services. Okay. My degree was in Homeland Security and Emergency Management, and that's one of the things that I had to learn how to do, is navigate the internet to help people find services local to them.
So purpose, we should discuss some conclusions before I hit the road.
I guess yes.
Yeah, we should discuss some
conclusions. This is our first podcast. We're learning how to talk to each other.
Yes. So conclusions. As I said, I would say about purpose, there's two ways you can achieve it, or it can come to you. As I said, there's the down-up approach where you seek out meaning in your actions. You find, how can I get connected? How can I be useful? How can I find meaningful things to do? And then there's the top down, as we discussed, which often comes more from your culture, from your religion, where it says this is your purpose in society, this is your purpose in your church, and so forth. And I said there's a lot of interaction, and I think the question, do we have purpose, there's no easy answer to do we have a purpose. I think we all have to find our own answer to that. I would like to say we can all have a purpose. And I think our basic purpose is you've been born. You're very lucky to be born. Statistically, there's a great chance you might never have ever existed. So I think your basic purpose is to do something with the fact you were given the chance to exist. To be polite to everyone who didn't get to exist, you know.
So you're honoring those who never had the chance to exist by
Yes.
living their life vicariously through yours.
Yes, go for it. Well, think of it this way: you didn't exist since the start of the universe. You didn't exist. You didn't exist for a long time, and then you came along, and there's you. And then there's going to
depending on
be
how
a
you
point.
believe. If you believe in reincarnation, you existed from the foundations.
True. But that's just bullet points of sentences, so you know.
Right.
So,
all right, everyone.
Yes.
This has actually gone on a great deal longer than we anticipated.
Yes, we can cut a lot of the fun.
Yes. Well, I probably won't cut a lot. I'll just put it all together. We'll just have to learn how to tailor our stuff. Yes. But as a final closing, we need an opening line, guys. Us just saying, hey, this is Armonia Seminary and I am XYZ just seems so bland. And when I was doing Force Realist TV, and even as I'm doing Let's Regroup Building Stronger Citizens over on Knights of Awakening, I find that I'm having to do a lot of motions to make it seem like I'm, interested in the opening sequence when I'm more interested in what I have to talk about at the time.
And so also XYZ, terrible rapper name.
So give us some ideas in the comments below. How would you introduce Armonia Seminary's podcast? We'll talk with y'all later. Yeah, I just said y'all.
Y'all.
May the Force be with you. And
I was just going to say, I will put together a naughty list of anyone who recommends some awful taglines. And you will be named and shamed.
I won't let him do that.
Date stamped.
I won't let him do that. Your stuff will be public. That's enough. That's already there.
Fair enough.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.